and knowledge. V'gam yilamed es azulas, and also that which he taught others. So we call someone chacham muflig. We're not talking about what he as the general idea that he has wisdom inside of him.
No, the function of him teaching others.
One second. The first function of him learning, and then kizeh Hashem akinui levad. Kizeh Hashem akinui levad shemachanim lo Hashem chacham al Shem sheyesh bei chachma v'seichel. That which you say that he has, he's talking about, one second. That what he has, that he has seichel inside of him, that he's learned, that he's taught others, that's just Hashem Akinui. Let's read it inside and we'll try to understand this. Shemachanim le'Shem chacham, that you give him a kinui. How would you translate kinui? Nickname is usually the word, but here it's not nickname, it's more than that. It's a
title.
A title. A title that is a chacham, al Shem Shi, because he has within him chacham v'seichel. That's not chacham muflag, he's saying. The Shem HaKinui al adover hanimtze boy, lo yala etzem. Shem HaKinui, a title, is on something that he has within him, he contains within him, but not on his essence, on his etzem, on his essence. U'kmei klei molei zav, when you say a container that's filled with gold. K'sheshel and mazeh, emim zeh zav. When someone sees a container, a chest, let's say, filled with gold, and someone asks, what is this? They say, this is gold. You're not saying the container is gold, you're saying it has within it gold. Shem Akinui is a description of what's inside of it, not what it is. What's inside of it. So therefore, also, when you call somebody a chacham, based on the fact that he has a lot of seichel inside of him, he has a lot of, let's say, experience or wisdom based on what he learned or what he taught, it's only a description, it's only a title of what he has within him. You could also say it's not just what he has inside of him, it's also what his function is. You could also describe this person that he effectuates wisdom, because Paul, what he affects in his mind, that he thinks and contemplates ideas. And he also transmits chachma v'seichel. So basically he's saying so far that a wise person who has an intelligence in him, what he's learned and what he's taught, that intelligence is still called Shem HaKinui. It's what he has. It's like a chest that has gold in it. You're not describing the chest, you're describing it in general, that it has it inside of it. He has, so he says first it's a Shem HaKinui, now he went further, it's more than just Shem HaKinui, it's also Shem HaPu'ula, it's something that he affects, because he affects both in himself, that his mind is thinking and understanding, and he also teaches, transmits to others. So we have now Shem HaKinui, Shem HaPu'ula is called the Chacham, Shem HaPu'ula. The Kol Zeh, Be'emes Eina Mitayir Etzem Klei Chachmaseh. All this, in truth, does not describe, does not define, Mataya does not...
It comes from a higher level of ore than everything it contains.
Mataya does not
describe.
The Etzem Klei Chachmaseh. What the Keli really is about. In other words, it's all about what he has in him, what he's done, what he's accomplished. But not what he is, not what the Keli itself is. So the Keli that has gold, yes, it has gold in it, right? But you don't know what the Keli is about. Maybe the Keli is something else completely. So far, what he's saying. Shari Masha Nimtza Seichel B'Meichei Hari Eina Muchras Shuzel Masha Siskel Ba'atzme Ki Masha Kippel Muzulose. Because you could argue that what he has within his mind is not Eina Muchrach. You're not compelled to say that. You must say that he conceived of these ideas himself.
Created,
yeah. You can also say Ki Masha Kippel, he received it from someone else. Meaning, like the chest of gold. It's not the chest created gold. It's containing gold. So maybe he has all this wisdom as something that he received from someone else. He's going even further. It's also, we're not compelled to say that he even understands well what he has in his mind. Like Yale once said about somebody, er kann maßbar sein an ihnen zu anderen, was allein versteht. So it's not muchlos to say that he understands the things well. Like for example, there's a type of person who grasps ideas well. Who tafsen, he's a grasper. He's a tafsen. The person like that is able to grasp ideas that he hears. But he doesn't really understand the things that he's hearing, that he's grasping to their full depth and to their full capacity. So therefore, from this we see, it doesn't mean he can't. It just means we don't have a compelling reason to say it has to be that way. So from this we see, the fact that he has seichel in his mind, it's completely not an indication of what kind of mind he has. The keli, in other words, the nature of his actual container. And it doesn't describe the type of container, the container. And also that which he himself is maskil, he himself conceives of, is not an indication on how good his chachma is.
It's even a step further.
Yeah.
Because
there he said maybe he's not maskil even on his own.
Here he's saying he's batsman, but he's saying
also it's not his own.
Could be shallow.
Yeah. No, he's saying the opposite now. Okay. Because it's possible the other way around. That it came through a lot of effort and exertion, intense exertion. So, you could have a person who understands something. He's going to the opposite extreme. Before it was more... No, he basically, from all extremes, the fact that you're still not mataya the person real capacity, the etzem. So now he's going to... first he said, let's just break it down. First he said, the fact that he has intelligence could be that it's not from his own, but from someone else. Also not necessarily that he understands it well. Because you could say, it's not his own, but he understands it well. You're saying he may not even understand it that well. Now he's going and saying that it could be that what he understands, even that which he understands, is also not reflective of what he really is capable of. Because this came not through his natural mind, it came through his effort. He's not dismissing, by the way, the intelligence that comes from Yigiyah. He's just saying that, in other words, some people are born smart. Some people acquire it through effort. So the acquired through effort doesn't describe the type of brain, it describes what he's achieved. That's what he's saying. So he's not dismissing.
It still doesn't get to...
No, this is definitely a higher level. Before, he's saying that it may not be his own even. Or or he definitely doesn't understand it. Here he may understand it very well, but it's not describing what his mind was really like. It's very fascinating. One second, let's just,
It's pretty close to...
Okay, so let's him take a look.
So he's talking about really what a shame is. A shame to only be,
I think that's
can't have
No,
the
this is the same Shema Pula still. One second. Ki yesh kama b'nei adam. Here it goes. There are people. She'enim chachamim be'etzem klei mecham. They're not be'etzem. They're not fundamentally wise people. Okay. The yochel lehaskul l'schakim be'ezeh davar idei yigiyah. But they could understand, they could contemplate, and they could understand something through effort. Ukamayim yigaitim etzos time. That's a great mukher, right? Because it says when you when you exert yourself, and you find, you believe. That means that what's the chiddush of the Maimar Chazal?
So this person will
The
not...
chiddush, in other words, is yigiyah does result in something that you on your own would not have achieved.
Right, so this person will not be called a chacham, right? Yeah.
In the Shem HaEtzem, you'd be called a Chacham Shem
Well, he
HaPulula.
acquired, but that's what he is.
So therefore, that which he conceived of, or that which his mechagim, what he thinks of, his ideas, this does not describe his brain power. Let's put it that way. It doesn't describe his brain, his mind. Does not describe the mind, which is be'etzem a keli, a container for seichel, for intelligence. It's possible what he has now, his intelligence, came through effort, not through the pure brain power that he was born with. That was inherent in him. Interesting. One second. Ube'emes, parentheses. Ube'emes, quite a few lines. ובאמס, השיחלים הבאים על ידי להגיע לבד, אינם במיילה כל כך כמה מה שבו מצטב כלי השכל בעצם. Now he's saying something that be'emes, in truth, the seichel that comes through effort doesn't have the same quality that which comes from a naturally good mind, from essentially good
Say
mind.
less or more.
No, here he's speaking about less, but there's definitely this has some things that have more. Well, I don't know if he's going to say it here.
Okay.
So bottom line is there are three scenarios. He's describing how a person could have wisdom and still not be called a wise, fundamentally chacham muflig, like you said. Like
You
he
got it
began.
from somebody else.
Three ways. One is a scenario. In other words, things like Shem Akinu or Shem Pu'ula, which is either a description of a title of his, or of achievement, or accomplishment, or function. So one scenario is that his ideas are not his own, so he has them, but from someone else. Number two, possibility is that he's a tafson, he grasps things well, but doesn't necessarily understand them to the full depth and clarity, potential. And then we're talking about, the last thing we were talking about, someone who through effort, yigia, through his heart, exertion and effort, yigaita mitzvahs, he comes to a profound understanding, but it's not that does not describe the kli, the nature of the container of his brain. It describes what he achieved. And the parentheses described, he added in the parentheses on top of 577, the end of 576, 577, is that in truth, a person who has natural brain power, his natural container of his mind is more powerful, is a higher quality of understanding. And yet, it does say elsewhere that a person through effort can reach the essence, kechiyuli, the essential potential brain power. So that's correct, that's true, there's a certain quality in that. Someone especially who completely immerses himself in Avegegebenkeit, commits himself into the idea. But the main thing is someone who has a natural sichle tivim be'etzem, through effort, reaches even deeper in the essence. So the bottom line is, okay, let me continue. He finished the parentheses now. But in general, all this, the effort and all these different scenarios, is the pu'ulas klei mechi. It's the function, it's the effect, it's the impact of the container of his brain, of his mind. What he affects and does to understand any particular subject. Just like a pu'ula compared to another person, relative to another person, to transmit is also pu'ula with yourself, when you work hard at an idea. All this is the chitzenes hakei levad. So Shem Ha, it's not the Shem HaTorah. You can't describe the container. You're not describing the container, you're describing its effects, its impact, its pu'ula, its activity. That's what you're describing. So you don't really know from this description what this mind was like, what kind of brain power, the actual mind. Hagam da'ashpahi kfi eifna etzem. Even though the transmission is according to the etzem, what you have inside of you. So someone's transmitting is a good teacher, is usually reflective of what he's capable of himself in his own, in his essence. So theoretically, it is a description of who the person is. Even if you're describing his effect on others or his transmission to others, it's still according to who he is. So why is it not a description of him? It's still part of the question. According to the way he has his wisdom in his own mind, that demonstrates his power to transmit, to teach, to influence. Nevertheless, this is the answer. However, even though this is true, that's not a disconnect. What he's teaching is what he has within him, but it's infinitely distant from what he really is. The teaching, the transmission, and what he is. So the same the way it is with someone else, like teaching someone else, that even though the teaching reflects somewhat of what the person has within, it's still very distant. You can't really say. No, you can't just say that great teacher. You can just say a great teacher means he has a great mind. Not necessarily. Bottom line, You could say it's a great way of teaching. You can say that he has intelligence to teach, but it's not really a description of what is, because what he's doing is too distant, is very distant from what he really is. And like we could say, a person could have trained himself to become a great teacher. So of course he's reflecting something that he has. You can't teach it, you don't know something. But can you really say that because he's transmitting so well, that's why he has fundamentally such a profound mind? Because you also have the other way around. You have people who have very fundamentally great minds and they're very bad teachers. So then you have to say someone who really teaches and no one understands what he's saying, say that means he must be stupid. Not necessarily. He can have a brilliant mind, but he's not developed the skills of communication, or he doesn't know how to be patient, or he just is disorganized. I mean, there's a whole slew of things. So in other words, though they're reflective of one another, obviously in other words, a person teaching an idea, somewhat he understands it, or else he wouldn't be able to explain it. But like he said before, these are all so-called superimposed over the natural keli, the natural personality of his brain. So the natural personality of the brain is a whole different type of description. So that same thing. So the same thing is also in your own efforts. When you struggle in understanding something, he's saying the same thing. When you struggle to understand something, the way you achieved it, since it's not reflective necessarily of your pure brain power, it may be reflective of your effort and your commitment. So therefore, it doesn't really describe. So even though, of course, through Yigiyah, you're understanding it now, so why can't you say it means your brain had that capacity? But it doesn't describe the brain as it would have been on its own. The Yigiyah, the effort, it had an impact. It's like in a way saying a good teacher doesn't necessarily have a great mind. Or just the opposite way. You can have a great mind and not have effort and not really get it. But the mind itself is a good mind. Again, we're not talking here about reward and punishment, and we're not talking about what quality of a person. The fact is, there was the chassid that told Alter Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe demanded from him he should learn. So he says, Rebbe, because I could become a lamd. So the Alter Rebbe said, just like a ganef is not someone who could be a ganef, a lamdan is not someone who could be a lamdan. The fact that a person has the potential, which would be shema etzem or shema toyar, doesn't mean you are. You can't call a lamdan someone who hasn't actualized it. But on the other hand, someone who has doesn't mean that his potential is that. Anyway, that's what he's adding here. So shalei be'erich. To really fully understand it, we have to obviously finish the whole thing. So there's probably you see every few lines is another qualification.
What is he coming to bring this into?
This is going back to trying to understand, using the application I was describing, how when you go to work or anything we do in the material world, what part of it becomes a keli for eloquence. Yeah, there's a story with Samach Tzedek. What was the story? Where the guy was always dressed like a chassid, then he was in business, and one day he came dressed like a modern guy, or raised like more of a businessman. So he told the Rebbe looked at him, he said to the Rebbe, no, I didn't want to be a hypocrite. Till now, I was dressed like that. I'm a businessman, I'm not... So he said, I thought the other way around, that you were faking it when you were there. So it comes down to really, who are we? If you want to put it in practical issues. Who is the person? Okay, he's using Chachma as an example, but who are you? Are you a chassid that happens to be doing a job in your shlichus, whatever your business or work is? Or are you a business person who happens to be a chassid? That's the difference. So, on neshama, he didn't apply it yet, but on neshama, be'etzem is a lukus. It came down to this world to accomplish something. But it should never lose sight, who are you? Not what you do. When you ask somebody, there's a difference between Shema Teir and Shema Pula. You ask somebody, who are you? They give you their business card, there's a problem. Your business card is what you do, not who you are. So before Chet Eitzadas, you could say who they were, or the Mechava, that's what they did. And what they did is who they were. After the Eitzadas, the Eibush asked Adam, Ayeka, where are you? So Bavus, the answer from the Alter, what do you mean, where are you? He knew where he was. I don't recognize you. You could be sitting near somebody, and you're spaced out. And say, where are you? You don't mean, of course I see your body. Well, where's your mind? Where's your heart? I don't feel you're with me. Your presence is not here. So the Eibush didn't recognize the Tzelem Elokim anymore. Who he was and what he did. Split up. So he looked at someone and he say, who are you? Are you, have you become a product of what you do? Or what you do is a result of who you are? That's really the essence of it all.
That's
To
so
breathe.
cool of Hashem after he forced him to, after a leader like that. I'm so
Yes,
cool.
the best thing is someone that does what he
He
is.
loves the Ner Alila. You're not off the hook. I don't care. No Ner Alila here, Ner Alila here. I know why you like Ner Alila. So
I don't
Pushka.
have
Okay, yeah,
my
like
psychiatrist said I don't have to blame myself for anything. I have no conscience, I don't feel any more guilt now.
But you know, the Ner Alila is not the beginning and end of it all. Okay. Anyway, so bottom line is, okay, fine. So we go. V'yesh shir v'hefsik lahaskola shekvar yeshna b'mechi gam im yischakim b'zeh b'yesef. Yesh lezeh shir v'akbala. He's adding another component here. That even when you exert yourself, and it's coming from something that's not natural to you, remember, not Shem HaTeya, but Shem HaPo'ula,
But he reached the maximum.
there's a limit. There's a limit, a measure, a limit, and basically an end, hefsek. The point, how far you can go with your ideas that you have in your mind already. Even if you'll work hard, even if you'll concentrate hard and you'll really apply your mind to it, yesh lezeh shir v'akbala. It has a
It's not a
limit.
never-ending flow.
Being that the energy that is being drawn into this is only the external energy, shalakol zeh yesh midah v'gvul. All this has a limit, has a finite place and a limit. Ach Shem HaTeya, this is all Shem HaPo'ula and Shem HaKinui. Ach Shem HaTeya, the name that describes the thing itself, hu b'chinas pnimis hakeli. That's where the inner keli. Haina mashe klei meiche b'chinas klei kibul l'kabel l'haimek b'chol chochm v'seichel l'haskebay b'chol pam sheyilmid aval pi she'en adayim mitzias chochm b'meiche. He's adding that, okay.
But what do you think?
Okay.
Can you just dwell on this a little bit?
I am, I'm going to explain. I am, I'm dwelling on it.
How do you have a name that describes the Pneumius? When itself is a Keli, in one level it'll be a Pneumius, and another level, I guess, above.
Maybe you could say the word brilliant. You could tell if a person is brilliant, even though he hasn't acquired much
But
knowledge. He's just a brilliant person.
But itself it's a Keli. It's only be certain dimensions. Ultimately, for
What he's saying is like this. What he's saying is like this. I'm going to just read it again. Ach Shem HaTeya b'chinas pnimis hakeli, it's the inner part of the keli. Haina mashe klei meiche hu b'chinas klei kibul l'kabel l'haimek b'chol chochm v'seichel. That means that his container, his natural, innate, built-in container to receive l'haimek and to penetrate the depth into every wisdom, chol chochm v'seichel l'haskebay, chol pam sheyilmid, every time he learns. Even though even though he has no chachma, wisdom actually in his mind.
What does that mean?
It means like this. It means like, let's say you say somebody is a prodigy, born as a brilliant child. You said, you could have a prodigy, a brilliant mind, and let's say someone recognizes this prodigy at an early age.
one day
So he has no experience yet. He's not learned anything. He doesn't know mathematics, doesn't know Gemara, doesn't know anything. But the brain power that he has, you call this is a Shem HaTeya. You have a brilliant mind right here. It may not actualize, but you have a brilliant mind. That's a completely different type of the name of a person than what we said till now. Again, let's make it clear. We're not talking about judgment here. We're not talking about levels. We're not comparing. We're just talking about description, how you describe somebody. So you say somebody's a born prodigy, means that even without this, he has the ability that whatever he's going to apply himself to, he's going to understand well. Even though he doesn't have any seichel yet in his mind, doesn't have mitzias chachma b'meichel, means ideas. Not that he doesn't have seichel. Of course, he has a brain. That's obvious. That's why he said. That's why he began. He said. That's why he said before like
one
this.
dimension.
The other person, the Shem HaPo'ula, is whatever he acquired the intelligence from someone else, which means that's contrast. He was not been able to understand it on his own. Someone else taught it to him, or he grasps well, and doesn't understand well. Or he worked hard and does get it, but it came with effort and with all the limitation of effort. And even then, as he said, has a limit. It has a limit. This person doesn't have any of those things. It's his own brain power that can conceive, not someone else's. He's not just grasping someone else and then and he has the capacity to understand, and it doesn't necessarily come with that much effort. He didn't say that right now, but with effort obviously will be deeper, as he said. But it means that and he has no limit. Anything,
Limitless.
yeah, it's anything he will grasp because of that type of prodigious mind.
You want, is
So
I,
this Hashem Atayar. Then you could call it prodigy. You know something. Let's be practical. Let's say you have two people sitting. One is a child that is called a child prodigy. Another person made an unbelievable scholar, but we know that he worked very hard at it. You wouldn't call him a prodigy. You may call him brilliant. You may call him a lamdan. You may call him a very profound scholar. You may trust him even more than you trust the prodigy. But you wouldn't necessarily call him a prodigy. A prodigious mind is a particular definition of a particular type of mind. I think mind, could be a little confusing to us. That's why let's use another thing. There are people who are naturally good with their hands. And you could say, this person is good with his hands. Another person was trained to do it. If you really are professionally, maybe you could even see the distinction between the two. But you can't. Some people you can describe, you're describing the entity, or you're describing what it achieved. As simple as that. I mean, that's the bottom line. And unfortunately, or very often, people who have a natural, you call Shema Teir, the Shema Pa'ula actually is not living up to what they really could be. That's a constant issue. And then the other way around. So it really, remember, the end of the day here, there's not a Veda here. He's not talking about who's better. He's talking about describing Pnimis HaKeli and Chetzenis HaKeli. You want to describe something? I think it's a critical distinction because you're describing, it's almost like a diagnosis of saying, this is the type of brain you have. This is the type of heart you have. This is the type of muscles you have. Now, if you work hard, you can compensate. But there's some people who just naturally have a certain type of structure. And I think this has nothing to do with Avodah. This is not about changing. It's like not changing your stripes. These are your stripes. Everybody's got their personality feature. So the fact that somebody is doing a lot of chsadim, let's say a big Baal Tzedakah, another person who's not doing any tzedakah. The fact is, one could be a Isha Chesed Shem HaTayr, but a Shem HaPa'ula, he's just not ever doing it. He's never acting on it. Another person could have trained himself, he's really by nature stingy or nature not giving, but he became a Baal Chesed. So of course we know what we want from somebody. But the question, what do you define the person as? This is a Isha Chesed, there's a person, but personality was a giving one. And now obviously, he could do both, but I think that's really what it comes to. We shouldn't be pushing more. We're not trying to expect more. We're just simply trying to find the descriptions of how he's trying to describe a Pnimis HaKeli, Chetzenis HaKeli. In other words, like we said before, you could say a human being is a Tzelem Elokim. That's a Shem HaTayar. You cannot say a tree or a Malach is a Tzelem Elokim. It's not their Shem HaTayar. Their Shem HaTayar is a Shliach, Shluchi Shefa. I mean, it's a whole different role. It's a whole different personality, actually, a different Mahus.
The other one might have felt the shlichus better, but it's not it.
You can't call it. You would not call you call a prodigy actually someone who has the potential. You usually don't call a prodigy necessarily someone who actualized it in the name. Someone actualized, you call something else completely.
It's raw form.
It's raw form. It's raw kelim. Yeah, it's raw kelim for sure.
an innate talent? You're born with, like a born artist or born...
Yeah, absolutely. Innate. It has to be innate. That's the key. He doesn't say...
Good with his hands, he could be a good surgeon.
But it's not just innate. It's a description. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's more levels of it because, listen, even a chacham, to say somebody's a prodigy, is this the whole person? The person may be much more than being just a prodigy. So it's not dafka Shem HaTayr on the person, it's a Shem HaTayr on the chacham part of it. Okay, but that's...
It's not deep enough.
So what's I say? Okay, so fine. So that's the type of person we are. So here he goes. And it's like a potential force. Keche Yuli is a potential force. This means that he's capable. Possible, capable. It doesn't yet have. It's like the exact opposite of what we spoke till now. Till now, it was all about what you are actually achieving. Here, there's no haskola b'mitzias yet. There's no idea. There's no seichel in substance yet. Rakukechi Yuli, it's only the power, potential power.
That he was a chacham, though. I mean,
Yeah. Lahaskil l'schaka b'chol dvar chachma. It's a potential power capacity
Still control.
to conceive and to understand every dvar, every intelligent, everything of that, every wise idea, everything that has chokhmah. K'moy came primis hakeli, mashakeli hu ba'achona teva. Remember we talked about the barrel. The keli itself is well prepared, is conducive. Chona teva is also like well prepared, well conducive. The kabel called dvar chokhmah l'schakem ba. To receive every seichel, a thing of seichel and this chakim. In other words, take an example. A person, let's say, some people are born with like heads of clay or whatever you call it, like a stick holz, or a cup, a stopped cup.
Golden.
Huh?
A golden.
Yeah. So they could work hard, and they can reach great heights, and there's definitely a purpose in that. But their keli, you can't say was conducive to chachma. It was harder for them.
Really dumb guy.
And they have to overcome. That's why he said that before even.
Secretary.
That even by the person who has seichel, and he has something that stops him, there's something he has to overcome. And that overcoming, meaning the keli is not muksher. Like they say with food, certain foods you eat, we learned it earlier, certain foods make your head heavier, and it's harder for even an intelligent person to, certain foods are very refined. So bottom line is, there's a keli that's muksher, that's what's called, the keli then that's primus a keli. You could say this keli is is conducive, is completely ready, fitting, tailor-made for this energy.
The Kech HaSkala, that's
Yeah.
Hashem.
And that's what is a Shem HaTeir, not a Shem HaPu'ula.
Yeah. The whole discussion is on the Keli, it's on the brain itself, the whole discussion.
Right.
Because the is by everybody equal. It's just
Well, but Koyach HaYuli Hanal, and in this potential power, Shu Koyach HaMaskil, that's the power to conceive of ideas, not the ideas themselves. How is a Shem HaEtzem. So Zeo Nikra Chochem Etzem, Mitzad Etzem Koyach HaChmosei. And this is when you say, this is the Shem HaEtzem, this is describing the Etzem. I see he's not really, Etzem and Toyar go back and forth.
yeah. No,
Because he began with Etzem, because he began Zeo Nikra Shem HaToyar. Now he goes Shem HaEtzem.
This
You
is
see the distinction. Hold on one second.
This is before the
I
man.
think
And
any
Shem Etzem, still not Etzem. That's the whole point.
because I think both side the person who has a verstopte cup and side the prodigy, both of them have the same the same Kech HaSkala from the neshama. It's just the actual brain is much more refined by the.
Where did you get that? I would say maybe the opposite. This is what he wants to say is the exact opposite.
Look, isn't it what he's saying now?
No.
Because he went back now to the Kech HaYuli. The Kech HaYuli.
Koyach HaYuli is, we're talking by the prodigy. We're talking about the Shem HaTeir that he started. It's not.
The
Koyach HaYuli is by the person who has the capacity that the Shem HaTeir and Shem HaEtzem are replaceable.
That's
Yeah.
Are replaceable?
Shem HaEtzem is
Yeah.
yours.
Okay, fine.
Sure.
Shem HaEtzem is yours. He'll go fight you. He's going to say
No, I'm sure they're different, but in the context here, what we spoke about before was Shem HaPula. Now he's talking about
I
the
just said that
potential.
because I thought they were irreplaceable.
No, they're definitely replaceable. And no secret is beyond him. It escapes him. Honest, lashon, like running.
I think then he goes further in the back. Kli,
Okay, so Vayamash is bar the il perik shin chof aleph.
Thank
Oh, there, the common perik shin chof aleph. Well, by kli mipnei she'ein ze chochma v'seichel atzmei elashu b'chinas kli the kabel calls kol and the container, which is not yet seichel, because like we said, he didn't yet necessarily achieve the wisdom.
yes, that's the two levels.
What are you saying? One second.
Go, just another drop.
Elisha, who begins clearly the kabel close kol er seichel v'chachma. How is it? Rak nikra shem atayer, shem atayer is keich etzem kleich chachma.
So the Shem HaEtzem is the or.
Maybe another line, maybe another line.
Va'er hamer u'mislabish b'zeh er atzmi shalamayla had ma'er,
Oh.
and the air that radiates and is manifests in this is an essential energy shalamayla had, much higher than the air habo b'chinas hashpo v'gil b'chitzein sechel b'frat habo yadei yigia. Okay, let's see here.
It always has to be positive, yeah.
Keich then also keich maskul. Let's read it and then we'll try to figure it out anyway. Okay, so we have here is like this, that he has unbelievable potential.
But it's not possible to say what was mentioned before, no?
For sure not, no question about it. He's talking about Primis Akeli here, not Chutzenis Akeli. He's breaking Primis Akeli into two parts here. I think maybe Eir and Keli, I'm not sure. The question is, Hashem, actually, see, Hashem is a Keli. He made that already in the cloud before, so everything is Keli here.
Right.
Question is, what's the difference between Shema Etzem and Shema Toya? Okay, we'll figure, either we'll figure it out or we won't, we'll figure it out. About claiming, okay, it sounds like this so far. Like he started before, he says, someone who has that capacity, that he's able to apply himself, whatever he applies himself, will understand that type of prodigious mind, that's a Shema Teir. He just explained it. He has the potential and so on. His Keli is mukhshar, his Keli is refined and prepared and ready, conducive to this Chokhmah. This is Shema Teir. Now he added, Uba Kelim, Pnei she'ein ze Chokhmah v'seichel atzmei l'shbekin claim kol this. 1 second. I think he's distinguishing in the Keli itself between the Keach Yuli. Like in other words, the potential to understand things by this prodigy mind, and the Primis Akeli, the actual container. So the container doesn't yet have seichel, but it has the capacity to understand anything. It has brilliance. It has a brilliant power. So think of it like an instrument that was never used, but this instrument can go anywhere. Think of it like this. Here's a car that's been used hard and worked hard and can drive pretty fast. A new car, you've never used it before, but its capacity is far more powerful. Its kelim are much more powerful. But B'Pel Mamish, in actuality, you cannot say it reached 200 miles an hour or whatever it is. So there's really, I think he's saying two components here. One is the capacity of the energy of the brain and brain power, and that would be Shema Etzem, describing the Etzem, a prodigious mind. But since the Keli itself doesn't yet have intelligence in it didn't yet actualize it, so it would be from the Keli's perspective, the Primis Akeli, you'd call it a Shem HaToyah. That's what it sounds like he's saying. So in other words, it's not because is not Shemus. It's the right before it enters that Primis Akeli.
Before it becomes a Keli.
And there's the Primis Akeli of the prodigy. That's what it sounds like, but
it's a dimension.
It's a very fine.
Akeli is the product of the
Shem Etzem is the energy.
Of the level higher of the air, of the level.
But it's still a shame. It's still
That's
the
what you're
Keli.
talking about at that point.
It sounds to me almost like Primis Akeli, if you want to really break it down. It doesn't say that.
It's almost air.
Okay, but it's not See, because it says like this. He just described what Shema Teir was. And now he's suddenly adding, then the Keach Yuli, this potential for power that this brain has.
That's the wisdom.
That's called, you can call this Shema Etzem, that this is a Chacham Mitzad Etzem Keach Chachmase.
And that's not the Kli.
Did he use Shema Etzem till now at all?
No. I don't think so.
Only Shema Teir?
I think so.
He bechlal never bought on Shema. He said Shema.
I know, it says Shema Teir, right, that's why I'm wondering, hold on.
I think this is maybe a step higher, that everybody has this koyach.
No, for sure not. For sure not. There's no question about it, it's for sure not.
Because he's talking about the koyach hamaskil, the koyach there.
No, it contradicts the whole thing. You're saying that people who have a Shema Pula have also a Shema Etzem. No, he's for sure not saying that.
I'm only saying that only because the brain.
No, for sure not. It's talking about a different type of individual. Koyach Yuli Anal is right here, 2 lines before. So what he never mentioned Yuli before.
He said
No. He goes undifferentiated.
We're talking about the same person. We're talking about a new person now. That's it. Anyway, so Shema Etzem says he's a Koyach Misad Etzem Koyach Chachmase. That means beside the Koyach, this potential in his mind, this person's natural, innate power, they're capable of understanding and of anything, and nothing escapes him. Nothing is beyond him. You cannot call it. What he's saying is, in the keli itself, because it's not yet a conscious idea, it's only potential. Keli lekabel kolos kol eir seichel chachma. Is a nikra shema teir. Shemataya is keich etzem kleach chachma. Okay, so it's basically saying there's 2 parts in this keli. One is the shema teir that describes Torah means it describes the type it's describing the etzem koyach of this mind. Basically, Tema Torah is describing the Shema Etzem. That's what he's really saying. So Shema Etzem is referring to the potential brain power. The Pnimis Keli is describing what kind of brain power that is. So that's called a real Chacham. The bottom line is called a Chacham from Shema Etzem and Shema Torah. That's the bottom line.
Divide them up again? I didn't catch the division between Shema Etzem and Shema Torah.
It's the same thing for all practical purposes. This person is called wise, brilliant and wise, a prodigy, because his tool, his container, is innately, without any effort, even before he conceives of anything, just has unbelievable
But you can't call
brain
this cup
power.
a water holder.
What's a prodigy? A prodigy.
You can't call it
So
a
the
water
essence of this brain power is prodigious. On the level of the container, because it's not yet an intelligent idea, it hasn't come out, you're describing this essence. So that's why you call him a wise person. So Shema Torah is really the description of Shema Etzem. That's what he's really saying. For all practical purposes. Etzem is the thing itself, and Torah is the description of the thing. It's a very fine difference. I don't know how much you have to look elsewhere to see really what the distinction is. And the energy, the brain power now, we're talking not the container, the brain power that radiates, illuminates, manifests within this mind, who atzmi. It's not, remember we said by shluchi shefa, the external keli, the external container only gets the external idea. The inner part of the keli gets the essence of the energy. It's far higher and greater. Remember he said even Yigiyah doesn't come to it. Far greater and higher than the transmission and the revelation that comes in the outer part of the container, canal. Specifically that which comes through effort. So it's higher. Okay. And it's also, it describes the name of a descriptive name. He's adding. The Shema Torah describes, number one, the container itself is fundamentally powerful, and it also describes the essential energy that manifests in such a powerful container.
And for this reason, I thought Shema Etzem preceded the order. There was Nisavish and Kli. Mamish Koko Yuli.
Basically, Shema Torah is describing two things: the power, the essential power of the container of being the power of wisdom that it has, and the essential wisdom that it actually draws down.
So when this is the Shema Etzem is now being included now in this idea. This is
No, we're talking about Shema Torah now, not
yes,
Shema
in
Etzem.
other words, it's bringing them both together.
Shema Torah describes two things: the etzem of the keli and the etzem of the oil.
So an empty cup would only have the Shema Torah. Wouldn't talk to the water in it. I mean, you just pour a cup of water, and that would be the etzem.
Yeah, of course.
How would you apply this to a cup? It's empty, not empty.
Problem with a cup is that, see, we don't see a qualitative difference between the inside and the outside. So that's problem number one. Applying it to what he said in the beginning about wine and the cup, he said there were two things. One was holding the outside of the cup and drinking it. That's outside the outer keli container, and there's the container inside that holds the wine. In the context of what we're discussing here, remember this has no brain power, so the example is not.
We're not
it's
learning about
limited.
brain. We're trying to learn
But
about
this is
kelim.
limited. No, we're talking about kelim of Atzilus. We're not talking about
so what?
or the kelim of the material world.
It should be the
A
same.
cup is a limited example when it comes to this level. Because what are you going to say? That the inside of the cup is a container for the inner dimension of the wine? It doesn't apply. That example is very limited. That's why he's moving to another example called the mind. Because now you're talking here, you need qualitative elements. There's no qualitative thing that happens. I mean, technically the barrel I gave would be an example somewhat. The inner barrel, the outside of the barrel may be
Stone and
maybe whatever.
Shellac.
But covered.
Shellac.
The outer
Shellac,
outside.
yeah.
But it has to be covered. Let's say it's covered. It's what is it called? They gilded, not gilded. It's So the outer part is one thing, but the inner part has to be certain wood, conducive, and it's conducive for the development of the wine and preserving it. So that's a small example, but I think the seichel is a better example because the seichel is really talking about ruchnius and gashmius coming together, intelligence coming into containers.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's why he's moving into much more subtler example.
A few days ago, we were talking about the or
Wait, so this is
having a
Right,
Keli type end to it. So
Right,
it's
exactly.
This is the opposite end of what we were going to do.
Absolutely, that's where they
Yeah.
both meet.
Yeah.
Right now he's actually saying that the primus akeli is a keli for primus ar, not the primus akeli is a keli for chitzenis ar, for right now. But it could end up being that he's going to end up saying that the primus akeli brings the chitzenis, that's where the ar meet, but then it brings the inner.
So it's everything a Keli within a Keli. So it winds up the whole
brain.
world is Kilayim. If you look at
The
it.
brain is excellent.
If you look
Remember
at it
also,
hard,
I just thought of this, but remember the mind
Same
is also an
ways.
example. Remember we're talking chachmas tima and chachma. That's where they meet. So maybe this example is beautiful because all other faculties in the body don't have
Where they
quite
meet.
that type of
No, but then you have to
meaningfulness.
find the interface of the.
No, you for
interface
sure
of
have. You can for sure have the
That's what
koyach. Mostly you have the faculty of love that manifests. But in the brain itself is the most conducive part to something that is very subtle, ideas. For example, the hands can grasp something. But though they don't have that, he wants to have something that is very spiritual and very and also physical. The brain is a good example for that. Look, I'm sure there'll be other examples. I mean, I still withhold. I want to see how he still didn't finish the idea. We're in the middle of it, so
We're going to the
The or
interface of the
Atzmi.
interface of the
Huh?
interface of the interface of the interface.
Absolutely.
That's what the whole shiur is about.
Yeah.
Going halfway to the wall, halfway.
The or Atzmi, is this the or Atzmi of his individual neshama or a general or Atzmi?
no, we're talking about here the individual here.
brain power, I think he's done.
Yeah. This individual person, we're talking about an individual. It's an example for an individual. Remember, it all started with an example. He said, "Kamei derech mashal, ish chacham muflig, nikshur b'shem chacham gadol." This chacham is shem hatayar. So he's saying he describes the person. You're describing the containers of a wise person, as opposed to describing someone who's achieved wisdom through effort or other things. That's what you're talking about. And this is a description. This description is the inner part of the cave. It's really giving us a formula that when you say somebody is what you do, you're describing their outer containers. Who you are, you're describing their inner containers. That's what it comes down to. Wisdom is just one example here. It can be 1,000 things. That's the bottom line. The truth is we need both. So we do things and we do have both elements. Obviously the goal is to what you do should be who you are. Then you have the Chechenis HaKeli is aligned with the Primus. But in life, the fact is our Chechenis HaKelim and Primus HaKelim are not aligned. Let alone or Kesser. We're not even getting to that. But so that's, I think, the first step here is trying to dissect. You see, it's really, if you think about it, step back a minute, beyond language, it comes to really how to look at things. See, it's easy for us to define people by what they do and what we see. This immediately tells you, before you define something, don't call somebody something until you really know what the person is. Just because what you see is not what you get. When someone, I cannot stand when a journalist or others, they call me, they say, an Orthodox rabbi, they call me. So I say to them, I say, I really don't like to be called that. So I say, what do you want to be
You don't
called?
want to be called Haredi.
No, I said, what should I call you? A non-Orthodox journalist? Not a reformed journalist? Why does you need an adjective before the word journalist? Just call me a Jew that's trying. No, but they need a label. Because we live in a world of labels. We live in a world of Shema Pu'ula and Shema Kinui. We don't live in a world of Shema Etzem and Shema Toya. We were living. You see stereotyping. That's called stereotyping. You see something, you put it on a shelf. That's what. The first thing that Al Tabit Al Mareu. Don't look at the outsides. Somebody came by the Rebbe. You see, the Rebbe saw the diamond in him or her.
Like with the compound.
Right, exactly. You don't look at the barrel. So the whole point. But we need to be trained. So what he's doing here is showing you there's two different things. Even if you see a wise person who's intelligent and brilliant, even that doesn't tell you who he really is.
Could be Korach.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about he's a Russia. I'm saying that it may not be so it's not about knocking him. It's just reality. Describing someone is not simple. That's the bottom line. Who you are is not a simple definition. Because I always say this, without lech l'cha ma'atzecha, who are we? Maybe you're a product of your parents, of your community, peer pressure,
Environment.
the suffering that you went through. You may not even be who you really are. You are a product of what things that happened to you. And then, and can you really say, this is who I am? So just even asking the question forces you to go to a place to find out what is your neshama like? What are your keiches like? I mean, I see this as a brilliant way also of creating a formula Even education. Here, Chassidus in Tanya, just to compare it, in Tanya talks about keiches and levushim. I don't know if I would apply it exactly to this, but it's very similar in a way. One thing is very reminiscent, very similar.
Boris and Katie.
Right, here's you go. You see two students in your class, let's say, you're teaching, or two children, your kids. One of them is articulate, seems intelligent, picks things up. The other one always seems not to get it and stuff like that. You ask them to say something, they don't say much. So the conclusion usually is, this is the smart one, this is not the smart one. I mean, that's the quick conclusion. Then you discover, if you have patience, this person may be very shy. Maybe this child was silenced, maybe someone yelled at him when he was very young, so he's like afraid to express himself. And when he starts expressing himself, you see brilliance that the other one doesn't have. So how would we call that in, let's say, language of Chassidus? We'd call, we don't know your keiches, we know the levushim we see. This person, there are a lot of people who, for example, have very brain power is good, but they never were trained to write in an organized way. So what comes out of their mouth or their writing is seems very confusing. Which means their levushim, they weren't trained how to think. That's not brain power. Levushim machshava is not, the difference between machshava and seichel. Machshava is a levush. Seichel is a brain power. The levush is how you express it. So there's some people who are trained, they're very good expressing, and their brains are not that powerful. And there are other people who have unbelievable brains, but they don't have expressive tools. Whether it's machshava, dibur, or maisa. You see this many times. Some people, they get it, but they just don't have the tools to really express it in a very articulate way. There are other people who are very articulate, but they don't have that same. Now you could have both. They're not mutually exclusive, but they could very well be. So in very many ways, I'm not going to compare because keiches and levushim is not mamish. The truth is, I would say it is. Keiches is much more shema teir, shema etzem, because that's your faculties. You were born with, let's say, you're tall or short. That's something you can't change. Your brain power is you can't change. Pure brain power. You can change how you express it. For example, a person with a lot of brain power is never taught to speak well, so the brain power is almost going to be like a powerful energy that has no. It's like lacked inside.
No act with
I mean, I met people like this who are like shy. You start talking to them, they're brilliant. They get it, they understand. Everything is processed internally. It's also not only dibur, by the way. Sometimes machshava, you have to also be trained to think organized. A lot of people have great brain power, but their thinking is not organized. And it's also so it's a whole other way of looking at chinuch. If you really how to look at a person and their potential, and not just stereotype people, fit them on a show. Oh, this one's weak, this one's strong. It's not at all the case. I mean, I know this. I see people who they were completely misunderstood when they were in their childhoods and completely screwed up as a result. Because the wrong expectations. The people thought they were not either. They weren't trying. All kinds of different things.
They were labeled. Yeah.
So first thing is assessing this. So I think levushim you can change, like Pula here. You can change a levush. You can change machshava, dibur, and maisa. But keiches describes who you are, and that's very much a certain what he's getting at here. Primus akeli, chitzenis akeli. And now, obviously, we want integration between all of them. Okay, so let me continue here. I'm going to finish this paragraph. Okay. So we described the Shema Teir describes the etzem power of this potential mind. And the name also describes this powerful container also has the ability that it also describes the power of the intelligence that it has, that it can draw down, that unites with his keli.
You do with the Olamus.
Everything
he's saying about Kalim and this, you can do with the Olamus compared to
absolutely.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah. Mind blowing. Yeah. He's adding now something. This energy, this essential, atzmi. Remember the atzmi, the primus akeli. Let me just bust through. That's why he said it. I got it. There are people, they say this guy Michael Phelps, who's like winning the Olympics. They say never been a swimmer like him. So I read an article about him, his anatomy, his physical anatomy. He's an unbelievable fast swimmer, And physical anatomy is it's a rare combination of legs, hips, and also even his toes are shaped almost like a paddle,
Webs.
like paddles. They're very long,
Like duck feet.
and his whole body structure, his skeleton is structured least amount of wind air resistance. Pasha begashmis, he's physically born that way. Nothing to do with any work. Now, obviously, with conditioning and working, he's a machine. And they show. I watched it. It's very fascinating because you see a keli. I'm just saying that is but shaped for. He's like made to swim like a fish. You
It's
know.
the exact same thing with the brain. If the brain is the physical brain,
Yeah.
is shaped and contoured begashmias to receive the brain power, so then that's it. That's a winning combination.
Yeah, but good, exactly. So his case. So what do you have here is his. So let's see here. So when you say, let's say he's a swimmer, him you could describe as he's natural swimmer. You know, he's just naturally swim. Some of us are just not natural, even though we can learn to swim. But he's natural. His keli marmam. So what so this is his previous akeli is made like that, and therefore it's conducive to draw down all the skills necessary. Remember, this keli is nothing when he's dead. You know, it's just a corpse. But it's a container that's so well fine-tuned to be a perfect container for swimming tools. A brain that's perfectly attuned
Physical brain.
to drawing down unbelievable amount of intelligence. So the Shema Teyar is describing both the essence of the container, what kind of container it is. It's a chokhmah container, and it's a container that brings down the etzem of the energy of wisdom. So we have the energy of wisdom, we have the outer container, we have the inner container. It's the inner container that describes the essential person, that describes the essential energy that goes into it. The outer container does not tell you much about what's really going on inside, both in the container level and on the energy level. That's what it comes
What if
from.
his soul is not a swimmer's soul? What if he has a beautiful keli for swimming,
I know,
but he's
but-
not essence.
But no, when it comes to swimming,
Yeah.
what means a swimmer's soul? I'm not really sure what that means. I never saw that in Kabbalah, but
It automatically draws.
no, right, exactly. That's what it's like fish
Yeah.
are built. Their air and keli is made. You know, everything about them
In sync.
is exactly in sync. What they need exactly to make them do what they're doing.
So much so that they say if they're in water, they're still part of the water.
No, you could argue, you could say it like this, that if he didn't go swim, or he didn't train, and he let it just all, like he got fat and overweight or something like that, then his keli, lost, he didn't live up to what his potential is. But there it's automatic. Intelligence, you can also say, look, remember, at the end of the day, it all comes from the same God. So the fact that the keli is fundamentally attuned to be the perfect container for
Physical brain.
intelligence, is going to draw intelligence down. Now, of course, God could stop the intelligence. There's no reason it wouldn't come down. But he did say, ultimately there are times where people are fakvetch, they're like in times of distress or other things that even for them it's not easy. It's not always flowing.
But the physical brain is perfect.
Right, exactly.
And that draws down the quality of the air.
Like the barrel for the wine, and absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Or like what he said earlier, the mushal, like the seed, is perfectly conducive for the power of growth. And as it decomposes, it will, like he said that earlier. He said that example.
That's a man.
Yeah, the kerchim. And he also, or the shemen and the psila. Like fuel, like water doesn't burn.
So could
Fuel is a perfect container for flame. So the previous akeli would be so-called that part of it that's conducive.
So the person who has the verstopte cut is his brain. His physical brain is not as perfect as the person.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the point.
In scientific terms, the question would be: is it the chemicals in the brain? Is it the physical brain matter? But that's just a matter of two different type of. Those are just
Say by
different
Einstein, he had a
chemistry.
lot of folds.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the brain is perfectly,
It's no bigger than other brains, but a lot
Okay.
of
it
folds.
will draw.
Okay, so now he's saying, okay, so he's saying like this. This atzmi, this essential energy, brain energy, we're talking about air now, that's inside the inner part of the container. And inner meaning here the conducive part, the part that is naturally attuned, naturally aligned, right? It's not sensed, it's not felt. Because it's in the essence of the container that's higher than any form of revelation. In other words, when you see this prodigy, I'm not talking about if he's teaching or you're not going to see this profound energy in him. But a little of it you could see. A little hargosh, a little feeling you could see, the sense you could have. The lepomim, keshemaskel eza haskola, there are times when you conceive of some idea, how you margish b'ze'em godel, v'nayla ma'ed. How he feels within it a very profound depth and a very exalted, a very high idea, very sublime, very exalted idea, naila. Very profound depth and naila. How do you translate naila? Elevated. Because it's hard to say. Emek, depth. And naila, a very profound. No, that's what emek is profound.
Profound depth. I think both go together.
Profound and depth is similar. Naila is
Exalted.
But what's an exalted idea mean? It's not about an exalted subject.
It's a dark. It could be very refined.
Yeah, okay, very refined, very high idea. It didn't come yet into any real understanding. Remember, Haskola and Haskola is more Chachma, Haskola is Bina. So it didn't yet come even into a real, can't even call it Haskola yet, but it's just a sense. It's an intuitive sense that something is really, something big is coming. And Mikolshkin, for sure not Hasaga, for sure not a comprehension of it. The person himself, this prodigy, doesn't yet know himself what's going on. Because he doesn't have yet a grasp of it, even not in Haskola. This is the exact opposite extreme of the person that already is tefus and already has seichel from somewhere else or yigiyah. See, here you're talking about the brain power, potential power. We're not talking here about any revelation at this point. It's like an energy that does not have any shape or form yet. Yeah. And with time will pass, as time passes. It comes into understanding, comprehension. Why? Because then it becomes thickened and it becomes more materialistic, more tangible, more substance, more matter oriented. And it comes into the outer containers. It gets carried down. In Yiddish, means it gets drawn down to a lower level. In other words, the energy itself is so sublime. And as it comes into the Chitzeni Sakeli,
could you say it's Chachma Bina Das? The one is pure Chachma, now it's Bina.
Probably not.
Further, but also Marigish, that's Das.
I would not say that. I would say it's more within that. It's Eidus Be'etzem, Eidus near the Kalim, and Eidus B'Slapshus in Kalim. That's probably more. Das is, I would not go there.
It's the divine energy when God blew into Adam Arishon.
And that's when it comes into comprehension. And that's when he feels that this is the depth. And then he realizes this is the depth that I sensed in the beginning of the conception. This is the inyan, this is the inyan, and that's how I heard it. In other words, it's like a sense where you sense that there's something very profound, very high. You don't yet understand it. And then as time passes and it becomes into the outer containers, you realize that's what I got, that profound and very high concept. Okay, 1 second here. So he's adding now a whole thing here. So that Etzem Eir is not felt, but you only sense it in the beginning. Okay, let's see where he's going here. Umuvam, in parentheses. And so understanding, now he's going the other way, that when you begin to understand it, when you understand it, you don't really feel the subtlety that was there in the beginning. It's possible that you should feel the subtlety that was there before, and you should have some grasp of it. He's just breaking it into even more detail. Basically, it's sometimes you sense the energy of a very profound idea. At that point, and then you grasp, then you begin to understand it, and then you realize what you that depth is. But when you realize it now, you don't have the
That's already
subtlety
das.
that you had in the beginning.
Chachma is Bina, and then finally das. It
That's
connects
what
it.
I
But he's saying, v'yachaliyas, it could be that even when you understand it and appreciate it, you can still have some of that subtlety
You
still
can't say
there.
that the Belishun Tzir is the Chachma, and then when he adds the Niskashim and he comes into Asogya, that's Bina. The also Margish is in a Kalavar Gosha. That's that.
You can say as you see fit. I don't see it. Okay? Ubepnimis hakeli ein hasichlim b'pchinas hagbala. And the inner part of the container, the sichlim, are without any limits. Why? Two reasons. Ha'aleph, mipnei shezo ma shebekechi yicholti lahaskel she'em b'zeh hagbala kol kach. One is because it's still a potential. The potential state, the capacity to understand, to comprehend. And that doesn't have any limits. Because capacity is just a capacity. It's not yet defined. V'abeis mipnei shezo eratzmi. And the second is because it's a eratzmi. It's essential. It's an essential energy. It's not an expressed energy.
Oh, so you're not talking about the container, you're not talking about the keli at this point. Okay.
No, primis hakelim. Yeah, he is talking
You
about
are
primis
talking-
hakelim.
Wow.
Well, kamoishu hu b'seichel.
It
One
seems like
second.
it has to have some define this. How do you say it's let's say.
Well, kamoishu hu b'seichel, like it is.
It's like when you look at it and the particle's defined already.
Let's finish them. We'll analyze it. Kamoishu hu b'seichel, and the way it's in seichel, kamoi kain hu b'midas. The same thing is also in emotions. The shem akinu v'apulu chitzein is keli achesed. The shem akinui, the so-called description of what do you say? Description of the title or nickname or v'apula and its function, activity. Hu chitzein sakeli is the outer part of the container chesed, the outer part of the container of chesed, of love. V'hi ha'tova b'frat shebo b'izgalo shemesei l'kfar lehitiv. This is goodness. This is the goodness, the detailed goodness, a specific act of goodness, kindness, that comes in a revealed way that was already awakened. That was already previously awakened within him to do chesed to someone, like he said with the seichel. This is already a seichel that comes once it's in action. It's not describing the thing in itself, on its own, it's describing how it's in action, how it's a verb, not a noun. That comes in a specific element, specific area, even within yourself. It's a specific. I'm going to go help someone individually. And how he transmits love to another. And he's called a isha chesed, a good person, a kind person, due to the goodness and kindness that he's doing, that he did, and he does constantly.
It's Talmud. It's like
You're not describing his fundamental nature. It's very possible that the reason he's awakened to do good with others is for a reason, ulterior motive. And that's why he's awakened to do good and kind. However, the descriptive name, however, is the essential container of chesed, shamuchan, that is prepared, lis'eder, and conducive to awaken ulasis teva chesed tamid, to always do good and kindness always. So etzem akli, the etzem ha'er shelamaylam b'chinas hagbala. This is the etzem akli, the essential container and the essential energy, which are interrelated. That's higher than any limitations. This is a descriptive name that describes, as he said, both things. The essential container and the essential energy. Let me just explain this. I once was giving a class, and I was discussing the difference between people, a person who does good things and a person who's a good person. A noun and a verb. And I was saying that a good person is 24/7. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe says about a soldier. He's a soldier 24/7, not only when he's fighting. He's always ready, any given moment. He's trained and ready. Well, the Rebbe saying about terose and nose. There are people who have 9 to 5 jobs. A person who owns the business, it's the whole day, 24/7, he's into it. Even when he's not doing it, it's his thing. So a good person is someone who's good no matter what happens, under all circumstances, when it's inconvenient, 24/7. A person who does good things, while he's doing something good, A moment later, he may not be such a good person.
The difference between a tzaddik and a bainity in the Tanya.
So a guy came over to me after the class. This is a mamish example for this. And was with tears in his eyes. A guy in his 50s. He says to me that you just answered for me a dilemma I've had most of my life. I had a father who passed away, he said, who was a very, in many ways, unbelievably good person. Tuesday night, I remember from my earliest years, Tuesday night, the doors were open. He was a wealthy man. Anyone who came to him, he would help. A loan, some charity, getting a job, a connection, whatever was necessary. There was no limits. But on the other hand, he was also very cruel many times to me, to my mother, to my family. Wednesday nights, if somebody came, when he had his poker game, you couldn't get into the door, no matter what, no matter how big the emergency. Come Tuesday night. And I always had this thing. He was this great man. He definitely did great things. And tonight, you answered the question. I always had. He's a man that did good things. He wasn't necessarily a good man. And I'm not taking away from what he did was good, because it's much better than someone who may be a good man doesn't do good things. He says, but it could be that he picked up from his father that Tuesday night, that's what you do. But when it's not convenient for him, he wasn't there for you. When it was convenient for him, when he wanted it. And again, he qualified. He said, my father was my father. And it's the same thing. It's like a verb or a noun. They say for men, love is a verb, and for women, it's a noun. Is it a state of being, or is it an action? Chassidus talks about, we say, Mola ha'oretz deis Hashem kamayim layam mechasim. The world will be filled with divine knowledge as waters cover the sea. What's the point? Why waters cover the sea? Because an ocean, you don't call an ocean land that has some water on it. It's a sea that happens to have land inside of it. That Mashiach comes, knowledge will become so much one of us, so much part of us. We don't say, I'm a person who knows. You will be knowledge. And you will be one with the divine. And the water will it's like going into a mikveh. You'll be so submerged in it that you become one with, like fish. You don't say, can a fish get wet? Can water get wet? So when there's a subject and there's an object, so there's I know and there's the knowledge. Now I know something. So there's me and knowing it. A true experience shouldn't even have that consciousness. You should be so one with it, you shouldn't feel I know it. You are the knowledge. Which is what das is. Chachma being you still understand something outside of you. So why was it called Chet Eitz Hadas? Why not Eitz HaChochma, Eitz HaBina? So it says, because das, you become one with it. Hargosha, you become one with what you're learning. You know? Chachma Bina, even though Chachma has its advantages of the bittul and all that, but it's still something you're conceiving outside of you. So what the problem was, before Chet Eitz Hadas, Adam and Chava knew, of course they knew there's good and evil, or else they couldn't have not listened to God. But they knew it like God knows good and evil, as an outside element. When they ate from it, that's a different thing. It's like a person, once you tasted from the tree, it's not like you knew that there's a tree. You know, some people say, I'll taste a little sin. I know it exists anyway. What's the big difference? I'll know or I do. But anyone that knows, that's done. No, once you do, there's no way back. Now it's part of your experience. It's no longer you read in a book. It's no longer a theory. So, and also in Kedusha, that's that way. So the idea is that a good person, when you say someone's a good person, again, this is not about judgment, because you can be a good person who doesn't do good things. You can do good things and not be fundamentally a good person. The point, however, is describing somebody, you're describing what they're doing or what they are. State of being, or a verb or a noun. And it's two separate things. Pu'ula and kinui, the two other names that describe what you're doing, what you're involved in, your title, your activities, your effect. What you are is Shema Tayyir and Shema Etzem. It describes, so the inner container is reflective of the name that describes who you are, and that also describes what you're capable of, which is the potential and the energy that you can draw down. That's essentially what he's saying. So let's put it this way. We're working our way from the bottom up. We live in a world where the package matters more than what's inside the package. But if you work from the top down, where everything started with a Atzmi, and then it dressed itself up in garments. Obviously, Primus Akeli came before Konsenis Akeli. So he's really training us to think, we go from the bottom up, we work our way that way. The truth is, it's the other way around. So the bottom line, what he added here was the not nirgish, you don't feel it. It's interesting, it's the exact opposite. What the things a verb, what you're involved in, if you're not doing it, it's not there. You can't say it's there potentially. Either you're doing the chesed or you're not doing it. In Pula. In the context of Shem HaPula, if someone will say, here's a person who's a chesed b'poil, unless he's doing it, you can't say. If it's potential, then it's teir and etzem. So therefore, that's why he's saying that, and then when it's potential, there's no real sense of anything there. That's why it's unlimited, for the two reasons, and it's a fundamental state. But Shem Kinoi and Shem Pu'ula, the opposite is true. It's all about what is revealed. So what you have is what you get. Now, but it doesn't necessarily describe the fundamental state. But they're not mutually exclusive, obviously. You could have somebody who's a Shem HaChachem on all four levels. Kinoi, Pu'ula, Toyar,
He's
Etzem.
actually immersing himself in it.
Made it completely.
Yeah, but this is what Isa tell me this, so it's mind-boggling.
Even a person, right, exactly.
He's constantly
He says about
doing
both of them, Meshach Tami.
He's constantly doing it, and then he's still not considered that that's what he is.
Because he says it could be for a different reason, like Yigiyah. It's not his natural person. Let's put it this way. Like I said before, you can be programmed to be a Frumi because you grew up in a home that's Frumi. You do everything right. But is it you? Did you own it? Or is it what you were trained to do?
He's forcing himself to do it.
Or even that form. Maybe he's trained and it comes easy. I mean, he's not even saying force. Yeah, look, again, it's not to be derogatory, it's just defining it. A gemachte or the geworden, a geborene to a geworden, they say. Born or became. Were you born crazy or did you become crazy? Huh?
Had to work it.
I made myself
Not sure.
I worked on it. I made myself crazy.
So let me read the kitzur and we'll
But that's about the thing.
A person's a breather, he's the eldest breath.
Tzaddik, but really,
Yeah.
He doesn't feel it.
it's not his shame at that. Yeah.
Look, it's interesting where he's going to take this. Is obviously going to get into. See, this is critical because what he's doing here is for the first time he's moving out of Chachmas Timan and Eretz. He's going into Kalim, into the world of Yesh. That the Yesh has a place that is not just what it's doing, but the essence of it. That becomes, that can be more conducive to the to the Ruchnis. That's the point here. He's trying to, basically, he's working now from the bottom of the interface, preparing it to receive the top of the interface.
Wow.
That's really what's going on here. I mean, so we have to really see how it develops.
Wow.
So let me read the kitzur.
He's starting from, he's going down to Arik.
Yeah. The hine kitzur, the hine up to 2 Tov Kuf Ayches. The hine bekelim yes primis v'chitzenis. The containers have an inner and outer. A primis hu atzmish shu keli lekable v'chitzenis hu l'hashpiyah. The primis, the inner, is the essence of the container to receive. And the chitzenis, the outer, is to transmit. That's why angels come from the outer containers, external part of the containers. They are the messengers of the transmission. And the shamas that come from the inner containers, they are containers to the energy, not just shluchim to go out with. But then he adds, "V'inyanam lamata." Again, lamata. Lamata, when they come down here, their inyan is to illuminate the world. But what they're transmitting is not the same thing that malachim or the chutzein sakelim. They're transmitting the air atzmi, the inner, the essential energy that's in the inner type dimension of the containers. And these two, chutzein sakelim, primis sakelim, is the difference between pu'ula and tayar. See, here he just uses pu'ula and tayar. Then he goes kinui. Okay. So this is the difference between the name, a descriptive name of functional name of function, and the descriptive name. Like the name Chacham, like the description of a Chacham, title Chacham. You title someone the word Chacham, Al Shem HaChachma Shebemeiche, because of the wisdom in his mind. Ushehiskil, I'm not saying Al Shem HaChachma Shebemeiche Ushehiskil, on the wisdom in his mind and that which he has conceived. Ein Zemetayr Etzem HaKeli. When you call somebody wise in that way, you're not describing the essential container. Because it's possible, that he received this, he may have received all this, he also received it from someone else. He doesn't bring the second the example. Or he conceived it through effort. That's only an activity, that's an action, a function. V'shem atayah hu sichli hu sheklei meiche hen klei kibul lekabel lahaim b'chodav v'chachma lahaskel bei. Shem atayah is a description of the container, not what he's achieved, not what he's struggled, what he's exerted, what his efforts. Hashem Atayar is a description that his container, the mind is a klei kibul, is a container, a conducive container to receive and to penetrate and in depth every seichel, every chachma that he can conceive, can he understand, he can think about. Right? And this also describes the essential energy that manifests in this keli. So both describes the keli, what kind of keli it is, and what the energy that it is. And that's why, and from this he feels sometimes, he feels in a certain concept a very profound depth, and he doesn't really know what it is.
What does that add? That's just telling us what the experience of the Torah Kli is, inside work.
I think it adds, because he wants to say that he wants to compare it to before, because it's driven by who you are, not by what you do. So he wants to show how it's so. Another expression of it is that it's not revealed yet, because it's who you are. It's a state of being. I think that's really what he wants to emphasize. And that what you do feel in the kitzur is you can't just read the kitzur, because in the opinion what he said was that
I think it's the same thing he's saying.
he says he said like v'hine. He says v'hine ha'er atzmi ein ze murgish.
Right?
In other words, he's trying to show that remember he said later why it's it's unlimited.
Yeah.
So it's really trying to show how it's like it's very close to the unlimited power of air. That's really what he wants to say. That's what he's adding. It's very, very subtle, and therefore it's not felt yet.
Hasn't come down into
Yeah, that's really what he's thinking.
actualization.
And when it does come into understanding, comprehension, because it got thickened, it became thicker, it became more substantial. He knows this is what he felt earlier. He knows this is what he felt earlier.
Transfixed.
The chaim b'midas, and the same thing in emotions, is shem ha'pu'ula v'atayr. Also in emotions is a shem pu'ula, action, doing it. The Tayr describing who the person is. And now next chapter he's going to describe how this is all a dugma example for the names in God. That you have also in the divine names Shem HaPula and Shem HaTayar.
You have to be pretty deep to be called by the Shem Torah.
Well, we all have a Shem HaTayar. Depends what it is.
What is Adam? What
So
is
this-
Adam?
that's good. He didn't use this, but you could also say a fool.
Jew.
There could be a fool that's a pile fool. There's a person, a fool is a Shem HaTayar. He's fundamentally a fool. You also have those two.
What else?
That we can bring
What about
about.
the word Adam?
Adam is usually a Shem HaEtzem or a Shem HaTayar. It says with four expressions: Adam, Ish, Gever, and Ish.
Yeah,
That Adam is the most Shem HaEtzem,
yeah,
and the other is Ish, Shem HaTayar.
like dirt.
Because it's the most reflective of Adam Elyon, Adam.
Yeah, Adam is because Adam is the closest to the description of who we really are.
Atzmos Adam.
Yeah. That,
Adam Elyon.
we said, for example, a person is a medaber is more of a Shem HaPu'ula. You know, sometimes Shem medaber can also be reflective of who you really are, that we're able to speak. But the person, like you say, a person is a bar seichel, doesn't necessarily define the Adam, because Adam is more Tzelem Elokim, Neshama. It depends. It all depends on what level you're talking.
That's why Adam created Adam, not the guy.
So Adam is more from the etzem of Hashem than even the breath that He breathed into us, which came from deep level of Hashem. But Adam is even higher because the group ultimately comes from a higher place. Just think about that.
Okay, so
Adam
we
is
conclude here. Okay, chapter 255,
Breathing-
285. I'm
breathing
sorry.
is a
Page
giver.
Pei Hey,
Wow.
and page 578.
No.